Elias Ward lived most of his adult life in silence. His ranch stood far from the town, surrounded by dry grass, empty fields, and a quiet wind that passed through the broken fence posts. Every morning he woke before sunrise, prepared the feed, checked the cattle, and worked until the sky turned orange. He had no one waiting for him at the table, no warm voice calling his name, and no child running toward him. People in town respected him for his honesty and hard work, but they also knew him as the man who always walked alone. Years ago, he had planned to marry a woman he deeply cared for, but life changed quickly. She fell sick, and despite his hopes and prayers, she didn't recover. After her passing, Elias closed a part of his heart. He kept himself busy on the ranch, telling himself he didn't need anything else. Seasons changed. Years passed, and he learned to live without expecting anything new. But sometimes, when he sat outside in the evening with a cup of warm tea, he felt a quiet heaviness inside his chest. It was the weight of loneliness, the kind that grows slowly and quietly until it becomes part of a person's life. One particular summer day, Elias rode into town to buy supplies. The heat was strong, and dust covered the road. The general store was busy with people talking, arguing over prices, and carrying large sacks of flour. Elias moved quietly around the store, picking what he needed. He didn't talk much, as usual. After paying, he stepped outside and began loading sacks of grain into his wagon. As he lifted the last sack, he noticed someone sitting near the water trough. A young woman, dusty from travel, sat with her hands pressed together, staring at the ground. Her clothes were worn and her face looked tired in a way that suggested she hadn't rested in days. Her long hair was messy, and she kept brushing it away from her face as if she didn't want to be seen. Elias didn't pay much attention at first. People traveling through town were not unusual, but then he saw her try to stand up, only to lose balance slightly. Before she fell, he stepped forward and caught her arm gently, steadying her. She looked up at him with a startled expression, her dark eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered softly. Elias nodded and asked if she needed help. The woman hesitated, unsure if she should speak. People in town walked past her without stopping. Some glanced at her with suspicion, others with annoyance, as if she was nothing more than a burden sitting on their street. She had been there for hours, but no one cared enough to check on her. The woman finally spoke her name. "Mara," she said quietly. Elias asked if she had eaten. She shook her head. He offered her a small loaf of bread he carried in his wagon. She took it slowly, as if afraid it might be taken back. After a few bites, some color returned to her cheeks. She thanked him again, her voice trembling. Elias assumed she would rest and then continue her travel, but instead she stood up and followed him to the wagon. Something troubled her deeply, and it was clear she was trying to gather the courage to speak. She opened her mouth several times only to stop again. Elias waited patiently, giving her time. Finally, she stepped closer, her fingers shaking slightly. She took a deep breath and said something Elias never expected to hear. "Take me," she said in a strained voice. "Give me a home. I will give you children, a family, anything you need." Elias froze. Her words hit him in a way he could not explain. He wasn't angry or offended, but he was shocked. He had never heard anyone speak with such raw desperation. She said it not with confidence, but with fear. She was not offering romance or comfort. She was trying to survive. Mara looked down as soon as the words left her lips. Her shoulders tightened as if expecting rejection or anger. She likely imagined being yelled at or pushed away, because that was how people treated those who were desperate. But Elias did none of that. He simply stood still, trying to understand her situation. He saw she was trembling, and not only from exhaustion. She had walked into a town full of strangers With no protection and no plan, life must have pushed her to the edge for her to make such a plea. "Mara," Elias said calmly, "you don't need to say things like that. You're tired. Anyone would be." Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head stubbornly. "I have nothing. No family, no home. People tell me to leave. I don't want to go back to where I came from. There's nothing there for me. I thought, if someone kind would take me in, I would work hard. I would give back. I would be useful." She wiped her eyes quickly, trying not to appear weak. Her voice grew firmer as she said, "I meant what I said. I can give you a family." Elias gently raised his hand, signaling her to stop before she pushed herself too far. "You're safe," he told her softly. "You don't owe me anything." Mara looked confused. No one had spoken to her with kindness in a long time. She didn't know how to react. Elias wasn't sure what her full story was, but he could clearly see she was desperate for safety, not offering herself in any wrong or improper way. She was asking for a chance to rebuild her life. After a long pause, Elias made a decision. He couldn't leave her there. He couldn't pretend he didn't hear her plea. He felt something deep inside, a quiet pull telling him that this moment mattered. "Come with me," he said finally. "Not as a bargain, not as anything you fear. Just come to the ranch. Rest, eat, find your strength. You can stay until you know what you want." Mara stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. Her lips parted slightly, but she couldn't speak. Elias didn't ask for explanations, didn't ask for work, didn't ask for promises. He only offered a safe place. Slowly, she nodded. Elias helped her climb into the wagon. She sat quietly beside him, holding the small loaf of bread as if it were something precious. The town, which had ignored her completely, seemed far behind as soon as the wagon moved. During the long ride, Mara kept glancing at Elias, trying to understand why he was helping her. She listened to the sound of the wheels rolling over the dirt road and felt something she hadn't felt in years: relief. She didn't know him well, but she sensed he wasn't a man who meant harm. His calm silence felt safer than the loud voices she had run from. As they approached the ranch, the sun began to set. The sky changed from bright gold to deep orange, casting warm light over the fields. Mara watched the land stretch out in front of them, quiet, open, peaceful. For the first time in a long while, she felt the possibility of rest. Elias stopped the wagon near the porch and helped her down. He told her she could wash up inside, eat a warm meal, and sleep in the guest room. Mara couldn't hold back her tears, not because she was weak, but because kindness was something she had forgotten. She stood there for a long moment, trembling, unsure of how she deserved such compassion. Elias didn't ask questions. He only opened the door and told her, "You're safe here." For Mara, those simple words were more valuable than anything she had ever been offered. And for Elias, he didn't know it yet. But bringing her home that evening would quietly change the course of his life. Mara woke up the next morning before sunrise, though she had barely slept. The soft bed felt strange after many nights spent under trees, in old barns, or on dusty roads. When she opened her eyes, the small guest room was quiet. The faint smell of wood and fresh soap filled the air. For a long moment, she simply lay there, trying to believe she was truly safe. She had lived too long in places where safety didn't last. Her body had learned to stay alert even when she was exhausted. But the quietness of Elias's ranch felt different, almost gentle. She touched the clean blanket and breathed out slowly. When she stepped outside her room, she found Elias already awake, standing near the stove, heating water for tea. He looked surprised to see her up so early. "You should rest more," he said in a calm tone. Mara shook her head. "I want to help. You gave me a place." "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Elias replied simply. But Mara was not used to kindness without conditions. In her old settlement, if someone gave food, they expected something back. If someone gave shelter, they demanded something in return. Her past taught her to repay everything quickly before someone used it against her. She didn't want to trouble Elias or give him any reason to regret bringing her home. She asked what work needed to be done. Elias finally agreed to let her help feed the chickens and collect the eggs. It wasn't heavy work, and he didn't want her to push herself too hard. Mara walked outside into the morning air, feeling the dry breeze brush against her skin. The chickens clucked softly, circling the yard. Elias watched her from a distance for a moment. He noticed the way she moved, careful, as if afraid to break something or make a mistake. She handled the chicken feed with quiet gentleness. She held each egg as if it were delicate glass. She didn't rush. She didn't complain. She simply worked with patience and focus. After finishing, she asked Elias for more tasks. He gave her small chores, sweeping the porch, folding the clean laundry, carrying firewood. She did all of it with the same quiet determination. But Elias could see something deeper in her actions. She wasn't only helping, she was trying to prove she deserved to stay. Around midday, Elias suggested she take a break, but she shook her head again. Her eyes had a softness mixed with fear, like she believed resting might make her unworthy. Elias finally said, "You don't have to earn a place here, Mara. You're not here as payment for anything." She didn't answer, but his words made her swallow hard. She wasn't used to being valued for nothing more than her presence. As the day went on, they shared small conversations. Mara told him a few things about her life, safe things, pieces she felt comfortable revealing. She grew up in a settlement that was rough, with people who cared little about others. She had no close family left, and the small community she came from had made life harder, not easier. Travel was dangerous, yet staying there had become even more dangerous for her future. That was why she left. Elias listened without interrupting. He didn't ask for details that would hurt her. He only nodded, showing silent understanding. When she finished speaking, she looked at him carefully, unsure of what he thought of her past. "You did what you needed to survive," he said. Those simple words made her lower her eyes. No one had ever told her she wasn't wrong for trying to escape. Most people judged before understanding. Elias didn't. In the afternoon, Mara helped Elias repair a loose fence near the corral. She held the board steady while he hammered the nails. At one point, the hammer slipped from his hand and landed near her feet. She jumped back quickly, startled. "Sorry," he said immediately. "Didn't mean to scare you." "It's fine," Mara replied softly, though her heart still raced. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of surprises. She had lived too long waiting for sudden danger. Elias noticed her hands shaking slightly. He stopped working and gently asked, "Are you all right?" Mara nodded quickly, but he could see she was forcing herself to appear calm. He decided not to push her with more questions. Instead, he slowed down the work, giving her space to breathe. By sunset, they sat near the corral fence, watching the sky turn shades of red and orange. The quiet between them felt comfortable, not heavy. The horses moved slowly across the field, their shapes glowing softly in the fading light. After a long moment, Mara spoke. "I want to say sorry," she murmured. Elias looked at her. "For what?" "For what I said yesterday, in town, about giving you children. It sounded foolish, desperate. I didn't mean it in a wrong way. I didn't know how else to ask for help." Her voice broke, but she held herself together. Elias shook his head. "You were tired, scared. Anyone might say something desperate when they feel alone. But I didn't want you to think badly of me," she continued. "I wasn't trying to offer anything wrong. I just wanted a place where I could live without fear." Elias understood. He had seen the same kind of fear in animals that had been mistreated. timid, cautious, waiting for harm that never came. Mara had lived too long in a world that taught her to defend herself with whatever words she had. "You don't owe me explanations," Elias said. "I didn't bring you here because of what you said. I brought you because I saw you needed help." Mara stared at the ground, her thoughts heavy. She had never known someone who helped without expecting something back. After a quiet pause, she whispered, "Thank you." The word carried more weight than anything she had said so far. It wasn't just gratitude for a meal or a room. It was gratitude for safety, dignity, and the chance to breathe without fear. That night, Mara helped prepare supper. She chopped vegetables carefully and set the table with gentle precision. Elias cooked the stew, and they ate together in peaceful silence. Mara kept stealing small glances at him, trying to understand the kind of man he was. Everything about him, his calm voice, steady movements, and patient eyes, felt unfamiliar but comforting. After dinner, she washed the dishes while Elias dried them. It felt strangely like a home, a simple routine shared between two people who were still strangers in many ways, yet slowly becoming something more. When the dishes were done, Mara stepped outside for fresh air. The stars filled the sky, bright and countless. She wrapped her arms around herself, taking in the wide, open land. She had never seen stars this clearly in her old settlement. It felt like the sky itself was offering her comfort. Elias joined her quietly a moment later. He stood a few feet away so she wouldn't feel crowded. "Do you think you'll stay long?" he asked gently. Mara hesitated. She didn't want to assume anything. She didn't want to take advantage of his kindness. But she also didn't want to return to the lonely, dangerous roads behind her. "I don't know," she whispered honestly. "I don't want to cause trouble for you." "You're not causing trouble," he said. "But people in town might talk. They already looked at me like I don't belong anywhere." Elias shrugged. "People talk no matter what. The only thing that matters is whether you feel safe here." Safe. The word settled in her chest like a warm blanket. She looked up at the stars again. "I've never felt safe before," she admitted quietly. "You can here," Elias said. Those words made her close her eyes briefly, fighting back tears. Not because she was sad, but because she was hearing something she had waited her whole life to hear. They stood together beneath the quiet sky until the night grew colder. Going back inside, Mara paused at her bedroom door. "Good night," she said softly. "Good night, Mara," Elias replied. When she lay down in bed, she didn't feel the fear she usually felt at night. She didn't listen for footsteps or danger. Instead, she let herself imagine what life might be like if she stayed, what work she could do, how she could rebuild her life, how she could one day earn the comfort she was being given freely. For the first time in years, she fell asleep with a small sense of hope. Mara had been on the ranch for nearly 2 weeks when the first signs of trouble began to appear. Life had become calmer for her. She woke early, worked beside Elias, cooked simple meals, and slowly grew used to the silence of the wide land. She sometimes laughed softly at small things, like a chicken running with a worm or a stubborn goat refusing to move. These tiny moments helped her heal more than she realized. But calmness doesn't stay untouched for long. One morning, when Elias rode to town for supplies, Mara stayed behind to tend to the vegetables. She watered the garden, humming a quiet tune she barely remembered from childhood. But when she later walked toward the barn to fetch some firewood, she noticed something unusual. 2 women from town rode past the ranch road. Mara recognized them. They had looked at her strangely the day Elias took her home. They slowed their horses when they saw her. Their eyes narrowed, their expressions turned cold, and they whispered to each other while staring directly at her. Mara froze. Their faces were not friendly. They were judging her, assuming things she didn't even want to imagine. She quickly turned away, pretending not to notice, but the women's whispers carried through the quiet wind. She didn't hear the exact words, yet she understood the tone. It was the tone of gossip, the tone of people who decided someone's story without knowing the truth. Her heart tightened painfully. All her life, whispers like that had followed her. Even when she was a child, people said she didn't belong. Life had taught her that the world was quicker to judge than understand. She hugged her arms tightly against her body and hurried back to the house. When Elias returned in the afternoon, he noticed immediately that something was different. Mara moved more quietly than usual. She avoided looking at him and stayed busy cleaning the same shelf over and over again. "Mara," Elias said gently, "something happened?" She tried to smile. "No, nothing." But the smile didn't reach her eyes. Elias didn't push her. He simply watched her, waiting. Later, while they were eating supper, he spoke again. "People in town said something, didn't they?" Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. She lowered it slowly and stared at the table. "They passed by earlier," she whispered. "They looked at me like I'm something wrong. Like I don't belong anywhere." Elias sighed softly. "They don't know you." "It doesn't matter," she said. "People believe what they want." Elias shook his head. "Their opinion is not your responsibility." But she didn't believe that. She had spent too long fighting to survive people's opinions, people's judgments. She felt like her very presence on his ranch was causing him trouble. The last thing she ever wanted was to repay his kindness with problems. That night, long after Elias had gone to bed, Mara sat alone on the porch. The moon was high, casting pale silver across the fields. She hugged her knees to her chest and stared into the distance. The stars were bright, but she didn't feel calm. She felt like someone whose time was running short. She remembered every harsh word from her old settlement. Every time someone blamed her for things she didn't do. Every time she was told she wasn't worth anything. The whispers from the two women earlier that day had opened old wounds, wounds she thought were healing. Slowly, she realized something painful and frightening. If the town talked badly about her, they would talk badly about Elias too. That thought broke her. Elias had shown her more respect than anyone in her life. He had given her food, shelter, safety, and calmness. He didn't treat her as a burden or a tool. He spoke to her with respect, and she couldn't stand the idea of ruining his name. The longer she thought about it, the more her mind convinced her that leaving would solve everything. She didn't want him to suffer because of her. Near midnight, she quietly started packing her things. A small bundle of clothes Elias had given her, a blanket, and some bread from the kitchen. She folded everything neatly, as if trying not to leave a mark behind. She stepped toward the door, her hand trembling. Leaving hurt deeply, even though she had only been there a short time. But she believed it was the only way to protect Elias from town gossip. As she reached for the doorknob, she heard soft footsteps behind her. Elias stood there, half asleep, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his hair messy from bed. "What are you doing?" he asked, though he already understood. Mara froze. Her bundle of clothes slipped from her hand and landed softly on the floor. I'm leaving," she whispered, barely able to speak. Elias stepped closer. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because they're talking. They'll say I'm using you. Or worse, I don't want them to ruin your life. You've given me so much already, I can't pay you back." "I don't want to bring trouble to your name." Elias stared at her for a long, heavy moment. His eyes were not angry. They were full of something deeper, something hurt. "You think leaving will protect me?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "Yes. If I go, they'll stop talking." "No," he replied softly. "If you go, They'll talk even more, and they'll talk about you for the rest of your life." Mara looked down, trembling. "You don't understand how small towns work," Elias continued. "People talk no matter what, but talk fades. It always does." "But I—" She tried to speak, but her voice broke. "You're not going anywhere," he said gently. Not as a command, but as a promise. Her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head weakly. "I don't want to cause you pain." "You're not," Elias replied. "You've brought life back into this house." "Do you think I don't see that? Do you think I haven't felt the change?" Mara's breath caught. She didn't know she meant anything to him. Elias took a small step closer, careful not to frighten her. "Mara, you work hard. You're kind. You're honest. You make the ranch feel alive again. I don't care what people say. Let them talk. It will pass." Her tears spilled down her cheeks. She pressed her hands over her face, struggling not to cry loudly. Elias's voice softened even further. "You're not someone who needs to run anymore. Not here, not with me." Slowly, she lowered her hands, her eyes red. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Are you truly sure you want me to stay?" "I want you to stay because it's your choice," he said. "Not because you feel trapped. Not because you think you owe me anything. Stay if you feel safe. Stay if you want to build something new." Mara looked into his eyes, steady, warm, sincere. She searched for any sign of pity or burden, but found none. All she saw was truth. For the first time since arriving, she believed him. She knelt down and picked up the bundle of clothes with trembling hands, not to run away this time, but to unpack them again. Her heart felt heavy, but not with fear. It felt heavy with relief. She didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know if she deserved such kindness. But she knew one thing. Elias meant every word. As she placed her things neatly back into the small chest by her bed, she felt something shift deep inside her. Something slow, warm, and unfamiliar. Maybe for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. Outside, the wind brushed softly through the grass, as if whispering its approval. And inside that quiet ranch house, something delicate and hopeful began to take root. Something neither of them had expected, yet both needed more than they realized. The days after Mara almost left the ranch felt strangely different, almost softer, as if something invisible had shifted between her and Elias. She walked with a lighter step, and Elias spoke with a warmth he never used before. They were still careful with each other, still learning, still growing, but something honest and deep had begun to form, a bond made from shared silence, quiet understanding, and the feeling of safety Mara had never known. Mara woke early each morning, but now she no longer rushed through chores out of fear. Instead, she moved calmly, enjoying the peaceful work. She fed the chickens while humming softly to herself. She swept the porch while watching sunlight spill across the land. Sometimes Elias would step outside and find her smiling quietly at nothing in particular, just grateful to be alive and unafraid. Elias noticed every small change. Before, Mara worked as if she had to earn her right to breathe. Now she worked because she wanted to help, because she felt part of something. He didn't say anything dramatic or grand, but he felt a quiet pride watching her rebuild her sense of self. She was stronger than she realized. One afternoon, Elias hurt his hand while repairing a broken gate. It wasn't serious, just a deep scratch and some swelling, but Mara acted as though he had been badly injured. She rushed to him, took his hand gently, and insisted he sit inside while she cleaned and wrapped it. Elias watched her with surprise as she worked carefully, her fingers soft and steady. "You don't have to worry this much," Elias said with a small smile. Mara looked up, her face serious. "You helped me when no one else would. Let me help you too." Elias didn't argue. For the first time, he let someone tend to him with genuine care. Her touch wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was soft, sincere, full of gratitude. He felt something warm in his chest that he couldn't name. That night, they ate supper together, the lantern casting gentle light over the table. Mara kept glancing at his bandaged hand to make sure he wasn't in pain. Elias chuckled quietly. "It's only a scratch," he reminded her again. "Still," she murmured, "someone should look after you." Her words stayed in Elias's mind longer than he expected. Over the next weeks, they grew closer in small, quiet ways. They talked while feeding the animals. They walked along the pasture fence in the evenings. Mara told him tiny pieces of her past, safe stories, gentle ones, not because she had to, but because she trusted him. Elias listened with patience, never pressing her to reveal more than she chose. One evening, as they sat near the corral watching the sky turn pink and purple, Mara spoke without warning. "When I came here," she said softly, "I didn't think I had a future." Elias turned to her. "And now?" She looked down at her hands, then at the open land. Her voice was quiet. "Now, I feel like I'm learning how to live again. Slowly." Elias didn't speak. He waited. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," Mara continued, "but I know I don't want to run anymore." Elias nodded. "You don't have to." "Not here." The wind blew gently between them, carrying the warm scent of the land. Mara closed her eyes, letting the breeze touch her face. It felt like the earth itself was telling her she had finally found a home. As the seasons changed, Mara grew stronger. She gained weight from regular meals, her cheeks filled out, her eyes brightened, and her laughter, soft at first, became more frequent. Sometimes Elias would hear her laughing at something small, like a goat jumping onto a hay bale, and he would smile without even realizing it. The town people noticed the change, too. Some still whispered, but others began to accept her presence. Occasionally, she went to town with Elias for supplies. She walked close to him, not out of fear, but comfort. People looked at them differently now, not with judgment, but with curiosity, sometimes even respect. They saw a hard-working rancher and a hard-working woman building a quiet life together. One day, while they were stacking hay, Elias asked her a simple question. "Mara, do you feel at home here?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." He nodded slowly, taking in her answer. "Good." But Mara sensed something more behind his quiet tone. Elias wasn't a man who spoke easily about his feelings, but she could see them in his actions. The way he gave her the better blanket during cold nights. The way he fixed the loose window in her room. The way he saved her favorite tea leaves for mornings when she looked tired. Their bond deepened. Not through big gestures, but through dozens of small ones. One chilly morning, Mara stepped outside to fetch water. She stopped suddenly, one hand pressed against her stomach. She felt dizzy for a moment. She waited for the feeling to pass, then continued her work, but something felt different. She didn't mention it to Elias. She wanted to be sure before saying anything. But the feeling grew stronger over the next week. Small signs that she recognized, signs she never expected to experience. Her breaths grew shorter, her appetite changed, and her body felt warmer. One quiet evening, she entered the house and found Elias sitting by the fire, polishing his old boots. He looked up when she stepped closer. "Elias," she said softly. He noticed the nervousness in her eyes and set the boots aside. "What is it?" Mara took a slow breath. I think I'm expecting." Elias froze. His hand, still holding the cloth he was using to polish the boot, went still in the air. He blinked softly, unsure if he heard her correctly. For a moment, he didn't move at all. Mara looked down, unsure how he would react. Her voice trembled. "I wasn't sure at first, but now I'm almost certain." Elias set the boot aside completely and stood up slowly. His heart beat harder than it had in years. He couldn't speak. His mind returned to the first day they met. Her desperate plea, her trembling voice, her words spoken from fear rather than hope. "Take me. Give me a home. I will give you children." Back then, he didn't know if life would ever give him a second chance at family. He had accepted loneliness. He had let the idea of children fade into the distance years ago. But now Mara stood in front of him, her hands pressed gently over her stomach, her eyes full of uncertainty. Elias stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mara, are you sure?" She nodded slowly. He placed a trembling hand on her shoulder, then hesitated. He didn't want to frighten her, but she took his hand herself and guided it gently toward her stomach. Elias's eyes filled with quiet emotion, not loud joy, not shock, but a deep, peaceful happiness that warmed his chest slowly, like sunrise spreading across the cold land. "Mara," he whispered, this is a blessing I never thought I'd have again." Her eyes softened. "I didn't think I would ever have a family either." They stood there for a long, still moment. No tears, no dramatic reactions, just two wounded people finding healing in each other's presence, sharing a future neither had imagined. Over the next months, Elias became even more protective, not out of control or fear, but out of genuine care. He made sure Mara didn't lift heavy buckets. He built a small chair for her to rest on while working. He added soft blankets to her bed. He cooked more often, though his food was sometimes too salty or too plain. Mara teased him gently about it, and he smiled in response. They prepared the little house together, fixing the windows, patching the roof before winter, and clearing space for the new baby. Mara often paused just to look at Elias working, thinking about how different her life had become. She had come to him broken, desperate, scared, expecting rejection or worse. Instead, she had found safety, kindness, and now family. The day their child was finally born, the sky was filled with soft morning light. Elias held the baby carefully, almost afraid he might break something so precious. He looked down at the tiny face, then at Mara, who lay tired but smiling on the bed. "She's beautiful," Mara whispered. Elias nodded, unable to speak. His throat felt tight with emotion. He gently placed the baby into Mara's arms, then sat beside her, his shoulders touching hers. The lonely rancher who once believed his life was already written now had a family he never thought possible. Mara, who once believed she had no place in the world, now held her future gently in her arms. Outside, the land stretched wide and quiet under the rising sun. Inside the little house, a new beginning filled the air, soft, tender, and full of hope. And though neither said it aloud that morning, both knew one simple truth. Sometimes, life gives people exactly what they need, at the moment they least expect it.